So who's excited to be here?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yes. Is there anybody who's not excited to be here, who was maybe dragged by somebody who is excited to be here? Come on, speak up. There's at least one person. You were dragged here by your mom? Thank you so much for being brave. We're going to pick on you for the next hour and a half. I'm just kidding. So my name is Sergei. When I was 9 years old, something interesting happened. Everybody in my family got sick. I was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes. My dad had arthritis and hyperthyroid. My mom had arrhythmia, which is an irregular heart condition. And my sister had asthma. So we found out within 1 year that we were all sick with supposedly irreversible diseases. We went to the doctors and they essentially told us all the same exact thing. They said, take these drugs or these shots or these pills for the rest of your life and you'll never get better. Okay? And my mom said, what? Come again? And they said, yeah, take these drugs and for the rest of your life you'll pay us and you'll never get better. And they also added, and make sure you maintain good jobs because no insurance is going to take you on now. So, you're going to have something to pay for the drugs with. And my mom said, okay, excuse me, I'm going to get a second opinion. And so she went to a couple other doctors first, and they all told my dad, for example, if you have if you have arthritis and hyperthyroid, there's all kinds of things you can do, one of which includes we could stop your heart and then start it to make, sometimes that helps the hyperthyroid, but 30% of the time the heart doesn't start again. So the odds are pretty good, right? My mom decided to do some research on her own finally, and this took her to the bookstore where she purchased hundreds of dollars of medical books, and she was reading up on all of our conditions, and there again found that, for example, for diabetes, your options are to take synthetic insulin, which wears out your organs, or to get a pancreas transplant for roughly $50,000, which your body may later reject. And it seemed wrong for her at the time to put her 9-year-old son through either one of those options. So she resorted to something that was a little bit absurd, but it worked. She would see healthy-looking people on the streets. Now, have you ever noticed some people look really radiant on the street and you're like, wow, that's an attractive person. And then some people don't look as radiant, so you could kind of tell, you could pick them out. And my mom decided that if nobody was going to tell her how to get to the bottom of this, that she was literally going to ask healthy-looking people until she figured out what needed to be done, right? So picture this. My mom was a huge, overweight Russian woman with a thick Russian accent at the time. And she would literally see people jogging down the street, and she'd run up to them and she'd be like, hello. My son has diabetes. Can you help him? I have arrhythmia. And now picture for a minute what you would do if that happened to you. Here, you're just jogging here by the lake and some lady runs up to you. Right? You keep running faster. Maybe you'd add, get away from me, crazy woman. So she really quickly realized that she needed to get her foot in the door, and this foot in the door was to compliment people. She'd run up to them and be like, you look so good. You're radiant. What do you do? How do you look so good? And then she'd casually throw in, hey, my son has diabetes. Do you know what would help him? And in this manner, she talked to maybe a dozen, 20, 30 people. And finally, she meets this lady at a bank line. She asks her the same questions. And Elizabeth turns to her and says, yeah, I know exactly what all of you guys need to do. After so many no's, she meets this lady who tells her, yeah, I exactly know the direction you need to go in. So she has her over for lunch. Elizabeth summarizes it for her. She says, this is what you got to do. You have to stop eating cooked food. And my mom's like, does that mean ice cream with blueberries in it? And she's like, no, that means raw fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and grains. And the reason for this is because those foods are high in vitamins, minerals, and enzymes, so they're more alive. And if you eat more food that is alive, you become more alive yourself. In a nutshell, that's what you guys have to do. So my sister and I were at school, my father was at work, and my mom was home alone kind of deciding, hey, this makes sense. I'm going to just go for it. Now we're a Russian family. We came from Russia in 1990. We loved steak and potatoes, and my mom knew that if she just bought healthy food and left all the other stuff, we wouldn't commit. We'd get hungry and go back to eating the way that we did. So she smashed the microwave with a hammer. She took the pots and pans and she loaded them up in the car and actually drove them across town and threw them away in an unmarked dumpster so we couldn't go grab them. Threw away all the food we used to eat, and just, at the time she had no idea what raw foodists ate, so she bought a big bowl of apples, a bunch of bananas, some carrots and celery. And what do you think happened when I came home? I can't speak for my sister or my father, but when I came home I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Give me the shots. I would way rather take insulin shots versus eating the healthy food. And the interesting thing about that was, it wasn't because I didn't like healthy food. My first thought was, what are other people going to think of me? Even at 9 years old, I was more fearful about what my peers thought of me than actually the taste of this foreign food. And it was kind of funny because at the time there were 2 vegetarian girls at my school, and I made fun of them so hard. I was like, you're vegetarian, you don't eat meat. And I think they call that karma, because literally in one night I became the quote-unquote freak. My mom didn't actually force any one family member in our family to eat this way. She did something a little bit unexpected. She said, honey, we have to have a serious talk. You have diabetes, and I understand that maybe that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you. And so she broke it down to me in kid-friendly terms. She said, diabetes is somewhat like having a handicap. Your organs aren't functioning properly. You know how last week when you passed out in the blood sugar coma, that was inconvenient and hazardous to your health? Well, this is only going to get worse. Your life might be shortened. And so I really think there is some value in trying a few different things so that you can live a long, healthy life. And no matter, how young you are, that message really makes sense. And if you ask any child if they want to live a long, healthy life or a sick, short life, what do you think they're going to say? So I was like, okay, that makes sense. Let's just try it for a little bit and see what happens. So 2 weeks go by, we're eating celery sticks and carrots and apples, and we're eating as much as possible to stay full. And the interesting thing is, our symptoms started to go away just in 2 weeks. So we all had these different conditions, and yet our symptoms started to go away. So we're thinking, oh, it must be a placebo. This can't possibly help everybody's condition. Let's go for a month and see what happens. After a month, even better results. No more high blood sugar. Amazingly, I'm this diabetic who supposedly can't eat any kinds of sugars, even if they're fruit sugars, and my blood sugar is actually improving. I'm poking my fingers, taking tests, and every single time they start coming out normal after just a month. So we go for 3 months, feel even better. This time we're like, if it's a placebo, man, it's a good working placebo. We feel great, no more asthma attacks, nothing. We go back to the doctors that diagnosed us. They test us out. You guys seem to be getting better. Miracle, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're eating this crazy diet. It's like, you eat as much raw fruits and vegetables as you want, and here's the proof that it's working. And the doctors actually said, no, no, no. It has nothing to do with diet. You have to go back to eating lots of protein right now, or you're going to die. And they added, if you don't start feeding your kids normal food, we're going to report you to child services. Which has actually happened to us several times. The lady or the guy comes around, and part of the reason I'm doing this, and part of the reason I like seeing young people in the audience, is because we kind of live in a backward society where if you tell child services that you're feeding your kids organic baby greens and avocados, parents go to jail. But if you buy them Happy Meals every day for dinner, that's perfectly acceptable. That's a little no. If you have kids and you feed them healthy foods, If you ever get that unfortunate call, make sure you educate your kids to lie and say, yeah, you know, thanks for your concern, lady, but we just came back from Burger King. And I kid you not, they leave instantly. So we were helped. We decided never to go back to those particular doctors ever again. We started just continuing what we were doing, and pretty quickly our neighbors started noticing and approaching us and saying, hey, well, if it worked for diabetes, I have this joint condition, or my mother has cancer, or this or that. Do you think that raw food could help? We had no idea at the time. There's no science behind it that we were aware of. And so we just simply said, hey, we'll share our story with you. You get a little group of people together. We'll tell you what we know. And if you try it and it works, you tell us that it worked, and we'll start a little database in this way. And so time passed, those neighbors became groups from out of town, and we started traveling and kind of fell into this education role, even though we didn't really sign up for it. But it was, people are in pain, people have health problems, and what are you going to do? It's like that quote from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. We kind of felt responsible. A few years went by, and at around the 7-year mark of eating nothing but raw foods, 100% strictly raw, we started feeling signs of less than perfect health. And that was very interesting. Now, when I say less than perfect health, I don't mean that my diabetes came back or that my sister's asthma came back. They were minor compared to that, but still enough to be alarmed about. Like, for example, my dad's hair started turning gray really rapidly. We were all experiencing these energy lulls where sometimes in the afternoon it was really hard to get up. And all of us had this phenomenon that happens quite often, actually, where you go to the fridge and you look inside, and then you're like, yeah, there's nothing in there I want. And then you come back literally 5 or 10 minutes later and you open the fridge and you're like, yeah, there's still nothing in there I want. And then you keep doing that. Anybody ever done that before? Yeah. So we were thinking maybe our bodies are missing something that, that we're not getting. And it was kind of alarming. Like, another thing that would happen is our teeth got really sensitive. And I went to the dentist finally, and he said, you have a lot of cavities, my friend. And I was like, uh-oh. Maybe living on orange juice for 2 months, just orange juice wasn't a good idea, kind of thing. But we were kind of treading, making our own path. So again, my mom took matters into her own hands, and she started contacting every raw food and nutritional guru she could think of. People like David Wolfe, Bernard Jensen, just all the big wigs, and asking them questions like, what is the healthiest way to eat? How much of various things do you need to eat? Are supplements a good idea? That kind of thing. And here's where it gets really tricky, because all of them had really well researched scientific backing. And for example, we'd go to the East Coast and they would say, well, where you go wrong is you eat fruits. And all fruits are hybridized. They have way too much sugar in them, and they actually ferment in your system, turn to alcohol. And if you eat fruits, you're actually getting drunk. And here's the scientific proof that says don't eat fruits. And okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we'd go to the West Coast, and there people would say, greens are all from the opium family. So if you're eating greens, you're all getting high. And here's the scientific proof behind that. And we're like, oh, wow. Okay, so we go to the North, and they say, don't eat sprouts, because sprouts, when they're small, have a high concentration of toxins, and that's definitely not good for you. The South, people would say, don't eat nuts. They cause brain damage. Other people would say, just eat goji berries and chocolate, and that's all you need. And some people said, well, there's really no good food on this planet left, so you just have to live off prana and become a breatharian. Unfortunately, at the time we were in LA, and the one ingredient for living off air is clean air, and we didn't have that either. So we got really confused. We were like, nobody knows. Some people, in fact, said, go back to eating all cooked food because raw food doesn't work. And so there's this confusion between a diet that helped us get rid of all our health ailments, and now these less than perfect health issues were coming up. And we were not only worried about us, we had been doing it long enough that some of our students would actually approach us and say, hey, you know, it went great for the first little bit, but then something changed, and now I don't feel as good. We were kind of worried and joking one night, like, what if the thousands of people we have educated by this point look up our address in one of our books and then come with knives demanding answers, because it only takes a few pokes with a knife before all your enzymes float out of you, right? So my mom took matters into her own hands. She said, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to find out. And this time she said, and you know what, I'm so past the dogma of just being raw food, I'm going to look at every single type of food and find out what the most nutritious food is and figure out what humans need to truly be healthy, and then I'm going to combine the two and see what happens. The second part was easier than the first. She went to the USDA website where you find the recommended daily allowance, the statistic that says humans need 1,000 milligrams of calcium to have strong bones. They need 90 milligrams of vitamin C to maintain proper heart functions, etc., right? We can all get there on the internet. And then she actually started researching various foods to see how nutritious they were. She researched everything from raw fruits and vegetables to dairy products. She even researched chicken McNuggets because who knows, maybe that's where the health was the whole time, right? And she found that the most nutrient-dense food was, of course, greens, right? How many people were aware of this? Excellent. About half of you. We'll try and convince the other half. So, just as an example, we have the vitamins and nutrients and their recommended daily allowance on the left here. And then we also have kale and lamb's quarters in the middle. Kale is, of course, dark green leafy that they sell here at the store. I actually have a special treat for you guys. I brought some kale from my garden. And lamb's quarters, which is also a weed, which is very nutritious, I also brought for you from my garden. So we'll be making a smoothie from that later. So just to illustrate, for example, calcium, 100 milligrams per day is what you need to have super strong bones. In lamb's quarters, 1 pound raw will give you 1,403. So how many people knew that greens have tons of calcium in them? The rest of you, isn't it awesome to know that you don't need a white mustache to have strong bones? But then some of you are thinking, a whole pound of greens? I'm not a horse. How can I eat that much? We'll get there. Vitamin A, 900 micrograms is what the USDA recommends. Kale gives you 21,012. Lamb's quarters gives you 15,800. That's enough to have strong eyesight, perfect skin, etc., what else? Vitamin K, super important. 120 micrograms is the daily recommendation. 3,720 is what kale gives you. Now, not everything is met simply by eating lamb's quarters or kale, but some greens are going to be higher in certain things and lower in others. And as a whole, greens had the most nutrients out of everything my mom looked at. Now, please write this down if you have a piece of paper. There's a great website. It's called nutritiondata.com. When my mom initially conducted this research, she had to go to the library numerous times, and she had volumes of books, and she would literally have to look up every single thing. Today, it's easy. You go to nutritiondata.com and you punch in kale, and it gives you all these options: steamed kale, raw kale, and all these different quantities. You click on it, and it gives you everything. Better than that, the site is actually evolving, so it has nutrition data for wild edibles now. You can actually plug in a whole recipe, create your own recipe, and it'll tell you approximately how many calories are in it and what it's nutritionally high in. So excellent, right? Nutritiondata.com. The next concern was, well, maybe it's protein that we're lacking, because after all, that is the most frequently asked question that we get. How do you get your protein? And we would tell them, from nuts and beans and everything has protein, but we never really looked into that. Like what is most nutrient dense in terms of protein. So before we get there, let's just talk about what protein is, because I've actually encountered some people who think that protein is an organ inside of a cow. And that the meat industry actually cuts the cow in half, grabs that organ, chops it up in little bits, and puts it equally in all the meat products in order for you guys to get enough. What do you think? A little bit absurd, right? Some people don't know. Some people don't know how many states there are. I asked them, and how many states? 51? 49?
20.
My favorite explanation comes from T. Colin Campbell. He wrote the China study. And T. Colin Campbell argues that while meat does have a lot of protein in it, it's not the best kind of protein for people. In fact, in eating meat and extracting the protein from it, we burn a lot of it in the process. Have you ever noticed you eat a huge turkey dinner on Thanksgiving, and then, 6 o'clock on Thanksgiving, nobody's out jogging. They're like on their couch. Right? Because we get drained when we eat meat. And the reason being is protein consists of 9 essential amino acids, and our bodies need to arrange those little molecules in a specific chain that's unique for the human body. When a cow eats protein, greens, grass, the molecules arrange for the cow. So when we eat the cow, we have to pull those molecules apart and rearrange them in order to assimilate them. And that burns a lot of the protein. So T. Colin Campbell argues that, while meat does have a lot of protein, more doesn't always equal better. He says it's actually easier for your body to get protein from the root source, from greens, from nuts, from beans. And virtually everything has protein these days. Another interesting fact that I've run into is I've traveled around the world presenting like this, and in Europe, the recommended daily allowance for protein is half of that of the US. What's up with that? Do you think that Europeans are that different that they need half the protein that Americans do? I researched this too, and unfortunately we have a big lobby behind the meat industry here. And the best way to sell product is to say, hey, you guys, if you don't get enough, you're going to die. And I've actually, in my whole life, have never met somebody that's been protein deficient. So, it's a pretty scare tactic campaign. So, for example, we have the 9 essential amino acids that make protein. We have their recommended daily allowance here in the middle. And we have lamb's quarters again and kale. For example, isoleucine, 700 milligrams a day is what they recommend. 1,149 is what you get from lamb's quarters. The next one down, 980 is what they recommend. 1,589 in lamb's quarters. So greens again give you enough protein. And not all these values meet the recommended daily allowance, but remember, greens aren't the only thing you're going to eat that day. If you're in Europe, you need half of this stuff. So, maybe make sure to eat your greens in Europe, because then you're totally meeting your recommended daily allowance. So we were faced with this substantial amount of evidence proving that greens were most nutrient rich. But for some reason, we didn't like eating greens. Can you think of some reason why you stay away from eating greens and you eat other things? Anybody?
Lots of chewing.
Lots of chewing, taste. What else?
Not sweet.
They're not sweet, they're bitter. Some of us actually don't have, if you have dentures, for example, it's hard to chew greens, right? How about this one? They're not socially acceptable. Right? If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to work one day and eat an apple or a mango in front of your coworkers. And they're going to say something like, Sergei's eating healthy today. And if you go the next day and eat a bunch of lettuce, you're going to start hearing whispering, like, what's up with him? In fact, often when I'm driving from class to class, I like to munch on greens because I feel like it makes me feel better. Because, I'm driving, I'm bored, I eat from boredom, not from hunger. And if I eat a lot of nuts or fruits, sometimes I just feel kind of heavy. But greens don't do that. So I'll often be driving in my car oblivious to the fact that you can actually see into my car. And I'm eating like leaves of celery, leaves of greens, just bunches of lamb's quarters. And I see people pass me occasionally, and they look, and then they kind of slow down, and then they pass me several more times, and sometimes they point, to their family to make sure that they see the weird guy eating greens. So it's not very acceptable to eat greens in public, unless it's in a salad or it's, a piece of parsley next to the steak. And yet all of us know that eating greens is healthy. We've been told that at one point or another. So my mom said, okay, how many greens do we need to eat in order to be healthy? And, I missed it. It's not in this presentation. Anyway, so she figured out that 40% greens by volume is what we needed to get into our system. So out of our whole day, we needed, to eat 40% greens, 60% everything else. Fruits, nuts, seeds. And that essentially came down to 1 pound per person per day. Roughly 2 bunches of kale per person. So she goes to the farmer's market. My mom's a doer. Once she figures something out, she goes for it. She bought 8 bunches of kale, 2 for me, 2 for my sister, herself, and my father. And she comes back to the house and says, today, this is your mission. You're going to eat 2 bunches of greens, and then you can go and do whatever you want. And then tomorrow, you're going to eat 2 more bunches of greens. And we're going to do this until our signs of less than perfect health go away. Whoa. Okay, I'll just make a big salad, right? 2 bunches of greens is huge. And after about 3 or 4 leaves, they start wanting to come back up again. They're not so delicious. My jaw is locking up from chewing so hard. We've had to find a better method. So my dad said, okay, well, we have this awesome Vitamix here. It's got 3 horsepower. It can actually liquefy wooden blocks. Why couldn't it blend greens? And plus, if it's in liquid form, 2 bunches, it's probably not going to taste very good, but you can just chug it and go. So we blend 2 bunches of greens, right? And if you've ever just blended straight greens with water, you lift the lid and it's like Swamp Thing punches you in the face. Like, are you kidding me? I'm not drinking that. So we did something that we weren't really sure of at the time. We shoved some fruit in there. We put greens, water, and some fruit. And what this did miraculously was that it made the smoothie taste really good. It still had that awful green color. But my sister, who's the artist in the family, said, well, hey guys, there's no color at night, so if you just turn off the lights, you can drink it and it doesn't look green. So there's a tip for your kids. If they don't like the color green, just make them drink smoothie in the dark. And we found that in this manner, making the smoothie with blended greens and fruits was really easy to satisfy that need of 1 pound per person per day. We'd wake up in the morning, just blend a green smoothie. I would drink 1 to 2 quarts depending on how I felt. And that was most of that pound was in that smoothie. Then usually I would eat some kind of salad for lunch or for dinner. And it was actually very simple to meet that 1 pound requirement. Within a month, no more signs of less than perfect health. No more constant food cravings. In fact, sometimes I would forget about food for hours. I'd go to university, I'd leave in the morning, I wouldn't come back till 4 p.m., and I just would realize, hey, the only thing today I had was smoothie, and I don't feel famished. I don't feel like, I could just eat everything that walks by me. I felt amazing. My dad's hair actually started getting its color back. And if you go to rawfamily.com, you can see before and after pictures. Some of you might say, well, you could have dyed his hair. My dad is from Russia. He doesn't even know that you can dye your hair. He's like, hair color? I don't know. So then we conducted this study because we wanted to see, again, is it a placebo that smoothie helps your health? And we found a doctor in Roseburg, Oregon, who said, I have about 30 sick people, and they're willing to try anything. So, these would be really good candidates. And we asked these people who are of various ages, had various health problems, here's your mission. We're going to blend you 1 quart of smoothie each. You're going to drink 1 quart of smoothie every single day while maintaining your previous lifestyles. You're not going to, if you eat chicken McNuggets every day, keep eating them. If you smoke 2 packs of cigarettes, keep smoking. If you don't exercise, great, don't exercise. Just drink this quart of smoothie. And we did it for a month. We just followed them. We quickly started learning that these people started shedding their health problems. Diabetes started to go down. Everybody who needed to lose weight started losing weight. There's a girl who was 17 who was suicidal for 2 years. She actually stopped taking her medications because for the first time in a long time, she started to feel happy. What else? Most importantly, actually, this was completely unexpected. People started craving healthier foods naturally. So people actually write us and say, hey, this morning I woke up and instead of drinking coffee, I went and I drank smoothies. Or on my way to the fridge, I was going to make myself some chicken, and then I was like, hey, you know what? I actually feel like a salad. And this was completely amazing to us because prior to this point, I would have been out here and I would have been like, raw, and everybody, you guys need to go raw today. It's going to improve your health. You got to cut out sugar, wheat, meat, dairy, sweets. And out of 100 people, guess how many would do it? 1? Really? You have that little faith in me? I did major in communications in college. 1 out of 100, huh? It was actually 2. Does that mean that 98 people are bad people? No, it just means that switching your diet to that degree is very unrealistic. I'll give you another example. I used to work for a year with my family at this cancer rehabilitation clinic where it was called Creative Health Institute, where people would just implement healthy eating. And we would constantly be given people who were diagnosed with stage 4 cancer who the doctors just gave up on. And they'd say, we tried all we can. You're screwed. I'm sorry. Just prepare for death. And these people would come. We'd start giving them smoothies, juices, just, coffee enemas. And these people within months would actually rehabilitate, get color back in their face, their tumors would start shrinking, they would start feeling a lot better. And then unfortunately most of those people would go home and start eating the way they were eating, and it would all come back and many of them would die. So, it's even when we're faced with death, it's still hard to not eat those comfort foods that we have become accustomed to eating. So we were very appreciative to hear that just incorporating this one thing into your diet naturally gets you to crave healthier foods. Because it's easier to add to your diet than take away, right? So the study was a success. There's a funny story. A guy who was smoking 2 packs a day called us a week before the end of the study and he said, I know you guys said not to change anything, but I just can't smoke another cigarette. And I hear my mom say, I hear you, but can you please just keep smoking for 1 more week? We don't want to sway the study. Yeah, so that happened. I want to show you guys something too. Here's the laser pointer. One thing we found that was pretty interesting is that you have to mix your greens. You have to rotate the greens in your diet, right? And the reason we do this is because all greens have alkaloids in them, and alkaloids are toxins. For example, spinach has oxalic acid or oxalates in it. And they say that if you eat too much spinach, it's actually going to leach calcium from your system, weaken your bones, give you osteoporosis. Now, they kind of scare you about spinach, when in fact coffee and things like white bread have way more oxalic acid than spinach, but they never tell you that. It's always the spinach's fault. When I was in Australia last year, I read in an Australian newspaper, U.S. finds carcinogen in celery. And they were just laughing about that. The bottom line is that all greens have some degree of toxicity to them. And the reason for this toxicity is very smart. It's so that we don't eat the same food every single day. Now, if you watch a deer eat, deers kind of, walk around, they migrate, they'll nibble some grass here, the next day they'll eat some leaves over here, and they never go back to the same patch, or, very rarely do they. If we lived off the land, we couldn't eat the same food every single day because of what? Seasons, right? Kale is only in season when it's in season, then you have to eat something else. You can only eat apples in the fall, unless you have plains, then you can eat them year-round because they come from New Zealand. But if we lived off the land, we would constantly be rotating our food. And it's very important to rotate greens for the purpose of not building up those oxalates to an unhealthy degree. Make sense? So, for example, actually, on another note, in small quantities, many of those toxins are actually really beneficial. Like they burst and kill cancer cells and do various other healthy things. You just don't want them to accumulate. For example, I just recently read an article that said arsenic is present in apple seeds, right? And you shouldn't eat that because arsenic is poisonous. Arsenic, I think they used to poison people with it. And it's in rat poison as well. You would have to eat 641 cups of apple seeds in order to get poisoned from arsenic. Now, could you physically eat that many? No, your stomach's not nearly big enough. In small quantities, the arsenic actually kills cancer cells and is very beneficial. That's why when I eat an apple, I always make sure to eat the core. Sometimes I even eat the stem because the stem has tons of fiber in it, right? Insoluble fiber helps you poop. So the way to avoid getting, any kind of alkaloid problems is to rotate your greens. And you don't have to even do this every day. You can eat spinach one week and eat kale the next week and eat something else the next week. Hey, you can even rotate it by the month as long as you don't go for 5 or 6 months eating that same thing. And sometimes, often when we travel, we make a smoothie out of kale, pears, and bananas because those are readily available ingredients. And 3 months down the road, we get very many emails that go like this. Hey Sergei, we were doing the smoothie you taught us how to make. Everything was going great. It's been 4 months now, and now I don't feel so good. And I always ask, what do you put in your smoothies? Oh, that awesome smoothie that you showed us in class. Kale, bananas, and pears. And I said, well, have you ever tried doing it with spinach? Oh, nope, no. Thought never even crossed my mind. So rotating your greens will prevent you from getting any kind of negative effects. On that note, sometimes we go to a health food store and we buy beets and we don't even know how lucky we are because we take the beets home, they have their greens, but nobody eats greens. Come on, no, beet greens? That's gross, right? So we take those greens and we compost them when in fact they are way more nutritious than the roots. So this is a comparison between beets, the beet root in the middle here, and beet greens, and we have the various vitamins and minerals. And as you can see, well, the beets are higher in a few things. Calories, they have twice as many calories as the greens. And the beets also have more sugars, a lot more sugar right there. Calcium, for example, 16 milligrams in beets, 117 in greens. Potassium, 325 in beets, 762 in beet greens. Vitamin A, 33 in beets, 6,323 in beet greens. Vitamin K, 0.2 in beets, 400 in beet greens. Isn't that amazing? If you look into it, you'll notice that parsnips and parsley, similar story. Carrots and carrot tops, similar story. And we have turnips and turnip greens, similar story. Isn't that good to know? That you can actually use the tops of, various roots in smoothies. Some people say, well, in my area there's not a whole lot of variety. We just have lettuce and kale. And then I show them this and they're like, oh, actually more than I thought. And the other issue I want to address before we continue is food combining. Remember how I said we didn't really know what we were doing at first, mixing the fruits and the greens? And we'd always heard that food combining, it's not good to combine fruits and vegetables. And that was the only kind of part of the smoothies that didn't click. So we started researching what a fruit and what a vegetable was. We started approaching botanists, reading books, and it got very confusing for a little bit. In fact, maybe you could help me figure it out. I'm going to name off some foods, and you're going to tell me fruit or vegetable, okay? Apple. Fruit. Mango. Fruit. Avocado. Fruit. Bell pepper. Fruit. Tomato. Fruit. Vegetable. Nope. Fruit. Melon. Fruit. Cucumber. Fruit. 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 What is a vegetable?
Green leaves. Roots.
Roots. Green leaves are actually not vegetables. That's a common misconception, but that's like vegetables are things that grow underground and have starch. There are a few exceptions like cauliflower, broccoli, and a couple other things, but mostly vegetables contain starch and or grow underground, are high in sugars. So when you look at a food combining chart, it doesn't say don't combine greens with fruits, it says don't combine vegetables with fruits. Greens are actually, they grow above the ground. You know, the stuff that's really malleable, you can bend it every which way, is actually similar to blossoms. They're more in that category, and it makes a perfect combination to combine greens with fruits. But if you're blending carrots and beets together with fruits, that's where you run into trouble. Now, my own personal belief about food combining is that it's more personal than that. Like, for example, some things straight off the food combining chart don't agree with me. So I just follow my body. I've learned that that is my best guide. And if I try a combination that doesn't make me feel good, gives me gas or a stomach ache, I back away from that. But I do sometimes put, apple juice with carrot juice, which is, according to food combining, not a good idea, and I feel fine. So just so you know. Yep?
Because there's no fiber.
Because, yeah. So, are we good? Any questions thus far? Nope. Okay, the other thing I want to discuss is what is better than greens? Is there anything better than greens? Seeds, seaweeds, what else?
Cheese.
Keep going.
Seaweed.
Seaweed is good, yeah.
Superfoods.
It's kind of, okay, getting closer. What kind of superfoods?
Wheatgrass.
Corolla.
Nope.
Berries.
Berries.
Cabbage.
How about wild greens? I was kind of tricking you. Wild edibles, right? So wild edibles are amazing. And the first reason I think that they're better than greens is because they're green, but they're also free. Right? What's better than something that's so nutritious that it literally helps every health ailment, but it's free? People say, Sergei, do you take supplements? And I say, no, I don't, because I've tried many different supplements. People will write us, they'll send us free bottles of everything just so that we can kind of promote it. And we've been approached many times by large brand supplements saying, hey, if you rep our stuff, we'll give you a free house or a free car. And I just don't personally believe in them. It's not that I think that supplements are bad, and there are definitely brands that are better than others. It's just, well, for one, they're expensive, so they're not affordable for everybody. Does that mean if you're poor, you're not allowed to be healthy? I don't think that's the case. Oftentimes, they've got this real fear base. If you don't eat our supplements, you're going to die. This world doesn't have enough health in it anymore, and this is the only thing that'll satisfy your need, that kind of thing. And the funny thing is, you turn that same bottle around, and it's made from dried kale and dried. So the same stuff they told you didn't have the nutrition is what the supplement base is. If you take supplements, please don't be offended. I think, there's a really good place for them. Like, for example, if you're traveling on a plane, you're not going to bring a blender or now because of airport security, they take away your smoothies. So it's nice to be able to throw some green powder in a glass of water and kind of neutralize the flight. But I always think that it's better to eat fresh. That's what's going to have the most nutrients in it. And the cool thing about wild edibles is they're free. I believe they're completely nature's superfood. And the reason being is they have longer root systems. They can go below the depleted topsoil and draw out those minerals that a lot of even organic foods are missing. So that's reason number one. They're also not hybrid, which means that, for example, a dandelion is the root of lettuce. You know, thousands of years ago, we didn't have supermarkets, and people just ate off the land. They would eat dandelions, and that's what they would make salads out of, probably. And then somewhere somebody noticed, this dandelion tastes slightly sweeter than that one. So they started picking that variety and planting it. And they did this over and over again until the leaves got completely sweet, they got huge, but the nutrition quality fell. So it was a trade-off. Food tasted better, but it wasn't as nutritious. So have you ever noticed that when you stop watering your grass in the summer, it dies, but the dandelions remain green? Does that mean that there's like some guy running around at night only watering the weeds? No, it just means that dandelion is nutritionally more sound. It's been around longer, it's adapted to survive in harsher environments. And my belief is if you eat that, you're going to do yourself a better service because it's much healthier. As gas prices rise, it becomes even less sustainable to truck in food from all over the place. It's just, not practical, and we might live to that point where it's going to be completely unaffordable and it's not going to happen, right? What do we do in that situation? I think wild edibles give us the opportunity to eat local, so it's more sustainable. And plus, if you're eating a dandelion that grows in Coeur d'Alene where you grow, it does something else. That dandelion's fighting off the same bacteria, the same microbes that your body is, except it's probably a lot better at it than your body because it's pure, it's getting all of its energy from the sun. And what that means is if you eat a dandelion in Coeur d'Alene, it's going to give you a hardcore immune system for Coeur d'Alene bacteria. So if you ever feel like a sniffly nose or any kind of cough coming on, eating a wild edible from your backyard, if it's not sprayed, will give you the best anti-sickness kind of boost that you need.
Including weeds?
Say what?
Including weeds?
Yeah. So it also gives you fresh air because you're going to pick weeds outside. You step outside, you get sunlight, so you're getting vitamin D. If I have to walk all the way over here to pick a dandelion, I'm getting exercise. I didn't even sign up for this. It's just automatically included. It's like an infomercial, and if you eat a dandelion in the next 5 minutes, you get all relaxation absolutely free.
Do you eat the flower or just the green?
Oh, you eat the whole thing. In fact, if you Google Sergei Boutenko or dandelion on YouTube or just on Google, you get an awesome video that I made where I show you how to make dandelion pesto. Because the secret to incorporating those bitters is you cut them with some sort of fat, either pine nuts or olive oil, and then the bitterness goes away and actually complements the pesto very, very nicely. And recently I learned that if you take the flowers and you stick them in a jar of honey, they preserve, and year-round you get these super nutritious, sweet honey flowers that you can put on toast or throw in your salads or incorporate them in smoothies. They're absolutely delicious. The last thing I want to say about this is, did you know that weeds can make you more relaxed? And I'm not talking about those kinds of weeds. It's been scientifically proven that if you kick off your shoes and just stand on grass, your heart rate and your cholesterol go down. It's not just grass though. If you look at your beautiful lake here, your heart rate and your cholesterol go down. So we get benefit from being in nature and just interacting with it, even without putting it in our mouth. And the coolest part about all of this is it's free, right? The best supplement company would love to harvest weeds and put them in bottles, but it's just they can't do it because it's not cost effective. Weeds, the second you pick them, they start wilting and they die. And yet every single one of us can go outside and pick a weed. There it is. So that's another class altogether. I do come and do specific wild edible classes. I might come back to Coeur d'Alene someday because I'm just in Missoula now, so I'm kind of local. And we'll talk more about weeds when I do. If you want to find out more, I actually just released an awesome wild edible iPhone app. It's available on iPads and iPods. And what it is basically just like carrying me in your pocket when you go on hikes. And it's a whole list of plants with awesome pictures, descriptions, recipes, that kind of thing. And it's cheaper than a cup of coffee, so it's $3. How are we doing on time? What time is it? 7:30? Okay, good. So we have time. Should we make a smoothie and go from there? Because I've been babbling long enough, so we need that little boost. So, typical smoothie, beginner smoothie, is really simple. There's really no science behind this. You just take 40% greens by volume and 60% fruit. You can even do 30% greens, 70% fruit. The bottom line is you want to put enough greens in them so that you'll drink it. Human tendency is, well, Sergei told us how good greens are, so I'm just going to shove, all this in and get all my pound right now. And then you try it and you're like, ugh, it doesn't taste very good. And what happens is you make the smoothies, but you don't finish them. So start so that they taste good, maybe more heavy on the fruit, so that you finish your smoothies, right? And then naturally, you'll notice your body's going to want less sweet. Your body's going to want the greens more. Yeah? So today I have fresh kale from my garden. And we'll just throw some of that in. And I also have some lamb's quarters from my garden. The cool part about organic gardens is they're often plagued with weeds that are super edible. And, sometimes when I'm selling smoothies at the farmer's market, people will come up and say, how dare you, you're putting meat bits in my child's smoothie? And I say, I'm sorry, I didn't name lamb's quarters. It's kind of got an unfortunate name. But I'll show you. It's just this awesome plant. It's kind of like a wild spinach. You want to know what's something cool today that I just learned too?
Well, thank you. Here.
So I was lucky enough, today I just picked up this pamphlet on noxious Idaho weeds. And over half of them are edible and super nutritious. Wow. So sometimes people say, well, if I go into a national park and pick wild edibles, am I damaging the ecology? And the awesome part is, if you talk to the Parks and Rec division, often the things that are most nutritious, they hate. So you can actually be patriotic and do your state of service by eating those things. So we'll throw in some lamb's quarters. And we'll do some pear. By the way, all this produce except for the greens is from Pilgrims, and they have really awesome quality produce.
You don't blend the seeds?
I do personally, but just in case anybody's super picky, it's just the chef in me that...
Does what?
I said, usually I blend the seeds from the pear, but sometimes people aren't so keen on the texture, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to eat them later as a snack. My girlfriend's funny. She'll eat her apple, and she knows now to give me the core. Does anybody watch Seinfeld ever? I'm pretty sure Kramer's a raw foodist. If you watch the show long enough, he eats the seeds and the core of the apple. He installed a garbage disposal in his shower because he enjoyed eating fruit while he showered. I don't know if I would take it that far though. So we have about half a pound of greens, 2 pears.
A little bourbon helps.
A little bourbon? I love that, One of my Russian friends loved meat so much his wife couldn't get him to eat anything like remotely like this. One day, don't ask me how, she decided to throw some meat in his green smoothie. And he freaking loved that. He was like, it was a kind of a savory green smoothie with tomatoes. He kind of made like a soup out of it. And the guy, that's what he did, and it helped his health even though it had meat in it. And whatever helps,
Was it raw or cooked?
It was probably both. I don't know. Raw meat in a smoothie, I don't know.
You put the seeds from the oranges in too?
Totally.
Oh.
Throw some water in there.
Pulverism.
Why not the rind? It's too zesty. Remember, we want it to taste good. We'll start with that for now. Of the rind? You can eat the pith, if I just... I'll eat the white stuff, but again, I don't want to make it undesirable for anybody in this class. It's a beginner smoothie. Couple bananas. And some blueberries. Now, blueberries are awesome for people with diabetes because they have tons of fiber, like everything I put in the smoothie, but they also help lower blood sugar. So if you know anybody that has diabetes, blueberries and mangoes are really good for them. Okay, rule number one about making any kind of food is you always taste it first. Because if you make something and it doesn't taste good and you serve it to others, you might be closing that door of opportunity, right? So if it doesn't taste good to you, somebody else might not like it. So I follow my rules. Yeah, class is over now. So Mike, I'm going to ask you to help me pass these out. And I'll pour nice tall glasses and then we'll make another one. So I'll just pour. This is my buddy Michael. I've known him for years.
Were you in that one video, the one eating the sandwich video?
Oh, the raw food kids? No, I helped out a little bit. No, I was in the video.
If you guys have questions while I'm pouring, I'm happy to answer them.
Can I ask you about, do you ever use carrot juice at all?
Yeah, I do sometimes. I'm not a juice hater by any means.
What about beets? Do you buy the beets, eat the beans, and throw the beets away?
That's funny. I joke about that sometimes. I do eat the beets themselves.
In juice? Like you don't eat?
No, I mean, I'll grate them in salads. I'll juice them sometimes. There's really good cocktails you can make with beets. They add awesome color to food. But I do eat the greens all the time. I think it's just good to be resourceful. So it's, don't eat one part and throw the best part away. Eat all parts. In the back there?
Do you recommend a specific type of blender?
I do. I'm a hardcore believer in Vitamix. And I've tried every single blender out there, but I just keep coming back to the Vitamix. Another good blender that's good is BlendTech. Don't buy the Montel Williams blender because it breaks. It's tempting because the Vitamix is, $300 and the Montel blender is $100. But a Vitamix will last 10 years and you'll have to buy 3 Montel Williams blenders in a year, so there's your Vitamix.
You buy a blender instead of a juicer.
Yeah, totally. You can do everything in a blender actually. So if I wanted to strain the fiber away, which I wouldn't really do because I like the fiber, I can just buy a nut milk bag or some kind of strainer and pour the smoothie in it and just strain it that way.
You want to mention about the app when it gets updates?
Yeah. So you guys are also lucky because I travel around doing this. Every other country other than the US pays $1,800 or more for the same Vitamix blender that you buy for $300. So seems like a lot, but people in Australia are jealous of you and you don't even know it.
Did you make a whole day's worth and then just let it sit in the fridge or something?
Yeah, because of the fiber, the smoothie doesn't oxidize as fast as a juice would. So I literally make 2 quarts or a gallon and I stick it in my fridge and I just sip on that whenever I'm hungry.
It doesn't separate at all?
If it does separate, you can re-blend it or you could shake it. Separation happens when there's not enough insoluble fiber in it. So adding things like pears or blueberries or bananas will help it stick together. And certain greens like lamb's quarters have a little bit of like gelatinous consistency to them and they will help smoothies stick together.
Do you ever put ice in yours?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Ice, frozen berries. In fact, a cost-effective way to do it is to go to Costco and buy their 10-pound bag of frozen blueberries and add the organic, healthy greens and then just, add blueberries here and there. How many more do we need? Raise your hand. Awesome. Next question.
A question over here. Lamb's quarters.
Mhm.
If you don't see any in your yard that you think is, can you actually buy it by seed and plant it? And same with dandelions, if you...
Okay, so yeah, that's a really good question. You can buy wild edible seeds from seedsofchange.com. But better yet is I would just go to the Coeur d'Alene Farmers Market. You guys have one here, yeah? And you approach any organic farmer and you say this. You say, hello, I'm a wild edible enthusiast. I've heard that at organic farms, you guys are plagued with weeds such as purslane or lamb's quarters. And I was wondering if I could either come to your farm and pick some, or if you'd be willing to, buy me or pick me a hefty bunch and I'll pay you for it. And most often they'll laugh at the idea of you paying for their weeds, so they'll just bring you a nice big bundle that should last you a week. And, you thank them, you'll figure out what it looks like. There's no guesswork, so that's really nice. But be careful, because you might bite yourself in the butt. I was so adamant about spreading the word about wild edibles in Ashland, where my family lives, that they now charge $4 a bunch for a bunch of lamb's quarters. So
if my mom's diabetic, should I throw a few extra blueberries in?
yeah, but literally everything in the smoothie is going to be good for diabetics. Another thing I want to say about that is we're scared to not eat fruit if you're a diabetic. We have these green smoothie retreats. We have 6 of them every year in different locations. We have 2 in Australia, 1 in Thailand, 1 in Canada coming up the first week of August. And at every retreat, there's at least one person who has diabetes. And within 1 week of just drinking smoothies, they have to cut their medication in half or sometimes get off of it because they have too much, basically they're eating so much fiber and so much good stuff that they can't take insulin, otherwise their blood sugar will be too low. So it doesn't take as long as people think. And I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't say that it was the smoothie, although I have a pretty good guess, because that's all that people are eating. I found that with juices, like when I mentioned that, maybe it's not a good idea to live only on orange juice. There were times when we were just experimenting on our bodies, as we did a lot, and we figured out that when you juice carrots, you can juice 5 pounds of carrots and it makes a nice glass, right? What you just did is you condensed more carrots than you can ever eat in one little glass. And you can drink the glass and you feel amazing and it goes straight into your blood. You could never blend that 5 pounds of carrots and drink it right away. It'd just be too much food. So I think that blending something in a smoothie is essentially eating it more in a way that it's meant to eat, in the quantity that it's meant to be eaten in. And it has that fiber, which fiber alone solves a lot of health problems. There's a great book about it called The Fiber Prescription by Myron Winnick. And he talks about people start eating more fiber, diabetes and cancer is almost eradicated just from that fact alone. how the USDA recommends that we eat between 15 and 30 grams of fiber per day, and most Americans are lucky if they get 6. It's because most of the stuff they eat is high-fat, low-fiber foods. Processed, yeah.
Can you go over one more time, you said carrots and beets should not be combined with something?
No, so just basically all root vegetables, it's not a good idea it's not a good idea, according to food combining, to combine root vegetables with fruits. Now, like I said, I will drink apple juice mixed with beet juice or whatever, but it personally doesn't affect me. So just, test it on your body. But greens, things that you can actually wrap around your finger, they grow above the ground. They're not technically vegetables. They're more like blossoms. So it's okay to combine those things.
How might it affect you? When you say that, what do you mean?
Some people, get really bloated. My body's kind of like a tank. I can pretty much eat anything and be fine, but, you're not going to die. You're not going to,
Sometimes
seizure
I
up.
get really nauseous after I drink a smoothie, so
Okay.
maybe that's for me.
It could be that. Do you put vegetables in your smoothie?
Sometimes I put beets in it, so maybe that's
One thing I've noticed pretty consistently is people often make their smoothies too thick, and for some reason that thickness negatively affects people sometimes, in that they get really constipated or bloated, and if you just add more water or more juice into it, that goes away. So if you flip your blender and the smoothie doesn't pour out, pour more water in it. And also, on that note, just because it's a smoothie doesn't mean that you just gulp it down. It's a good idea to chew and masticate it, because digestion really does start in your mouth. You mix it with saliva, and for this reason, often at home I underblend my smoothies so that I'm forced to chew the chunks up, and then it's doing me more good. I'll answer it right after this. Yes?
You tried put in your smoothie coconut leafy or something fermented like kombucha or?
I've tried it all, but basically the best, simple, most easy to digest recipe is fruits and greens. If you start adding nuts or oils, it's all going to slow down your digestion. Although for me, the one exception I found is chia seeds. Chia seeds are awesome. You just put like a tablespoon in any smoothie and it thickens it up, prevents it from separating, and it's also high protein, high energy food. Oh, by the way, lamb's quarters is actually a relative of quinoa. You guys know what quinoa is? Yeah. So one time I was in South America, I learned what quinoa looks like, and then I learned what lamb's quarters looks like, and it's identical except for quinoa grows slightly bigger and has more seeds. Nope. I mean, okay, so always try your food. Again, take whatever I say with a grain of salt. Try it first on yourself, and if it doesn't work, change it up. Often experts, and I'm guilty of this too, I say, everybody has to do this, but really nobody's been with you as long as you have, so try it. Feel it out, give it enough time, 1 or 2 weeks, because if you do it one day, it's not enough. You got to go a little bit longer. And if it doesn't work, find something that does, because you're really on your own. There's tons of people that love you, but who's going to take charge of your health? Nobody but you.
Can you put flaxseed in it?
Of course, yeah.
So what do you eat throughout the typical day?
Throughout the typical day, I try and start with a smoothie. If I'm traveling and don't have a blender hookup, I often like eating salad for breakfast, and I know that sounds kind of weird, but I have this salad that I make. It's called dressingless salad, was what I like to call it. And what I figured out on Maui, I lived on Maui for 6 months without a Vitamix, is that if you put sweet fruit like blueberries and pears, papaya, mango, in with baby greens, you don't actually need a dressing because it tastes amazing. The way I figured that out is I read this thing by Jane Goodall where she writes that greens and fruits are like 50-50 staples for chimpanzees, and their favorite thing to do is actually take a green and wrap it around a fruit and eat it this way. And I actually call that a gorilla roll. So I started eating all my bananas like that because it balanced the sugar and it was just kind of like a green smoothie in the making. And pretty quickly I was like, well, if I'm going that far, why not throw some papayas or some strawberries in my salads? And I did it, and that's a really great potluck item. People love the idea. You don't need to spend money on dressing. Your salad doesn't perish as fast because you're not putting salt on it.
So what kind of greens do you use in your salad?
Any kind of greens.
Do you like iceberg lettuce even, or do you go for that?
The only reason I would eat iceberg lettuce is to hydrate my system because it's really rich in water content, but it's pretty crappy for nutrition.
Yeah.
How many more smoothies? Raise your hand. Awesome. Almost there. Oh, sorry. Typical day. So I drink my smoothie. I might have a snack of fruit at some point or another. I then like salads a lot, and I often like to wrap my salads in nori leaves or other greens. I make this killer green roll where I take a salad and I wrap it in a collard green, so it's like super green roll. In recent years, I have not been 100% raw, so I'll occasionally eat some steamed yams or some quinoa, and I find that for a high active person that does me a lot better than loading up on nuts. Because before, when I felt super hungry and nothing would satisfy me, I would sit down with a jar of almond butter and some dates, and I'd be like, it's raw, it's good for me, and I would just eat it. But the one main difference between raw nuts and actually grains like quinoa is their fat content, where nuts have between 30 and 90% fat by volume versus grains have between 10 and 30. So you're eating a lot more nuts sometimes, a lot more fat when you're eating a raw food diet. How many more smoothies? One, two.
Not listening.
Nope. And oh, okay, cool. Yes, go ahead.
Is there much range in pH, alkaline to acidic, and whatever you're using?
Well, I tested all that stuff years ago, and I kind of stopped doing it because it's clearly working. So I met the guy who worked with the father, the pH miracle guy, and he said that the guy who wrote the pH miracle, he oversimplified everything. He the scale is actually much larger, and he just kind of presented it in this package that everybody could understand, but it goes beyond that, and so I don't know. I just don't worry about it, really. I know that greens are mostly alkaline. Fruits tend to be acidic, and sometimes people tend to cut out fruits because, we make it seem like we want to be as alkaline as possible, but that's not always the case. We have to have that balance. I glorify greens a lot, but fruits are what give us energy. Fruits are a lot more cleansing, meaning that they're kind of like natural colon hydrotherapy. They just cleanse our system. They're rich in water. So greens mineralize while fruits give us energy, and the combination is really what you're seeking. People that tend to eat only greens and not fruits, I find they get kind of spacey and almost like they're kind of floating away, and you gotta yank them by their feet, put them back down. And likewise, people who are fruitarians, I've met tons of fruitarians, and they all have teeth that are about to fall out. And there's, you could tell me all you want, fruitarian is the way to go, but if I look at your teeth and they're falling out, I'm just not convinced.
What's your feeling about the green superfoods like wheatgrass, spirulina, barley grass?
My same thing on that. So the wheatgrass for the longest time was discovered by Anne Wigmore, right? The grandmother of raw food. And she basically saw that she was sick and the medical industry wasn't really doing anything for her. And then she noticed that when her cat was sick, it would go and eat grass. So she started eating grass and got better. Wow. Then she developed, she tested all the different grasses and settled on hard winter wheat, is what they grow wheatgrass from, because for no reason particular other than that it produces the most amount of juice and it grows the fastest. And for the longest time, it was said that it was the only alkaloid-free green, so the best green to get in your system. When we looked into it, it turned out that nobody had ever sent it off to the lab to be officially tested, because there's thousands of alkaloids, and to test for one alkaloid is a $2,000 test. So it just, is just kind of assumed. My mom actually sent it off. It came positive for several alkaloids, which just kind of lumps it into the same green category. It's not anything special. It's very healthy for you, but you can get the same effects from kale, from romaine lettuce, from spinach. The other interesting thing is that wild edibles, wild grasses, literally every type of grass is edible, and there's over 400 varieties, which essentially means that you can get up in the morning, and if you don't spray your lawn, you could literally cut your lawn straight into the blender. And it sounds kind of funny, but I've done this. I have friends that do it and it's the same benefit. So you go and you pay 2 shots for this, little thing of wheatgrass, and then you're out watering your whole acre of grass, and you can easily do it. Grass, we're not cows. We don't have multiple stomachs, so it's really fibrous and kind of hard for us to digest. So it's nice to get either the grass in juice form or blended in a smoothie. It makes it slightly more digestible. Yes?
Before, let's say, an important athletic event, other than just drinking a smoothie.
Yep.
Do you have a secret recipe for just a little more energy for that event?
Just a good night's sleep. People say, do you do something special when you when I run and climb? And I don't really. Everything I do just prepares me for everything I'm about to do. And I find that now that I've started incorporating some cooked food into my diet, I find that I know that line where it's too much cooked food. For example, like I'm used to just always feeling light. I can eat dinner and then go for a jog straight after that, and it's never a problem.
All right, let's see 100 push-ups.
100 push-ups? A little bit later. But basically greens, fruits, that's my power food and a good night's sleep.
Well, how many calories do you think you eat in a day?
Honestly, I don't count calories, so I couldn't tell you.
Who works out, like if you do CrossFit or something like that, do you think you can really get enough?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Nutritiondata.com, just figure out your plan and go for it.
How many smoothies in a day?
As many as you want. Keep drinking them until your body says I'm full. But there's, you can't overdo it unless you are forcing your, just do them until you feel full and then don't do them. So let's do this. Let's just wrap up because I want to be punctual. And then if you guys have more questions, I'll be here and you can ask me. The last thing I want to say before I let you guys go is that please be aware that other people are not in the same place that you are, right, with health. Some people, it's been my experience that when mothers, fathers, husband, wives come to these events, there's usually, or sometimes, people back at home that are really nervous. Mom's at this event, and when she comes home, she's going to be reminded how important it is to eat healthy, and then our life is going to suck for the next month until she forgets again, right? I'm guilty of it too. When I found out that diabetes could be cured through eating healthy, I started doing things like calling up my friend and being like, oh, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm just eating. What are you eating? French fries? Oh, you mean death sticks. Don't you know that those death sticks are going to turn into a mucoid plaque, which will later give you cancer, which you'll need chemo for, and you'll probably die prematurely? hey dude, I'm just watching out for you. I'm just trying to be your friend. And then pretty soon, Steven didn't want to hang out with me anymore. So what I've learned is example works the best. And I know it's hard. It's like, you know, here's somebody you love so much and you want the best for them. And it's so tempting to be like, you have to do this, especially if they're your kid, you know. You have to do this. I'm your mother, I know best. But really, you're going to get those results if you do it for yourself first. Because kids, you know, we're hardwired to learn from our parents. I watched this National Geographic thing about how a mother bear teaches its kids what to eat. It roams around the forest and actually eats blueberries, chews them up, and then shows the cub, like, from the mouth, here is what you can eat. And the cubs will actually eat out of the mom's mouth. You know, and I think that humans are not too different from that. So when mom is telling, you know, drink this smoothie and she's sipping a cup of coffee or eating a pizza, but no, but this is good for you. The child starts registering, okay, it's okay for me to eat coffee and pizza. You know, I have so many stories about this. Like, for example, one time this lady drags her husband and he's sitting like this at the back of the room, and she comes up afterwards and she's like, oh, it's so hard. It's so hard. You know, this guy, I love him so much, but, you know, it's stressing out our relationship. He just doesn't like to eat healthy. And I think we might actually get a divorce over it. And later on she writes, and yeah, we did get a divorce. He just wouldn't get on the same page. And it makes it seem like relationships are only about food, right? I mean, do you just sit around with your loved one and just talk about food all day? Like, oh, I love peaches. Don't you love peaches? Tell me what kind of food you love. Oh, I'm so glad you like mangoes too. Oh man, we're just so perfect for each other. Right? That would be weird. So there's many other things that link us together. We don't really need food to separate us. The funny thing is, the guy emails me 2 years later and he says, hey, remember me? I was the really grumpy one. The wife didn't, you know, I couldn't get along with her. We got a divorce. I met this other lady, and it turned out that she ate healthy, but she didn't force me to. So I'm actually wondering if you can cater our wedding and make us a raw food cake, because the majority of my food is raw now. And then in the PS it said, my wife got so stressed out from the divorce, she stopped eating raw food. We innately have this desire to be healthy, and we don't need somebody to say, this is what you need to do. In Missoula, I vend smoothies at the farmer's market. You know, I just vend green smoothies, and I get so many different reactions. You know, I get the football players that are like, oh, what are you doing? Why would I want this? And oftentimes it's the kid who stops the parent and is like, Mom, I want to try this. And the parents are the skeptical ones. And yet all of us believe that kids don't like eating healthy. And so I just, you know, I approach it, you know, I let the kid make their own decisions. I say, hey, try this smoothie. If you don't like it, spit it out. What's it to me? Like, if you try it, you're already a winner in my book because you did something different. And the kid usually tries it and it's like, yeah, Mom, I want this. And then the mom's like, like, I don't, you know, lamb's quarters, what is that? So my advice, my kind of, as some of you leave and we don't talk anymore for a while, just think about that, you know, maybe come home tonight and say, you guys, I love you so much and I don't really care what you eat. I might try drinking more green smoothies or eating more raw food because I want to do it for myself. And the way that you can support me is to say, hey, you know, that salad looks really good. Can I eat some with you? And maybe we could share meals occasionally, but I don't expect you to do anything different. And then you can send me an email and tell me if that worked better than previous attempts.
So what's your email?
Sergei@sergeiboutenko.com. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have a really good sale going on right now. If you buy any of those books on the right of the table, 3 of any of those books, you get a free DVD. Everything is discounted. The DVDs are 50 to 60% off. The books are discounted already, so it's a little bonus deal. And what this does is it helps me go and present somewhere else. So, you know, the previous class I did helped me to come here. And if you guys buy some stuff, it helps me to go to the next place. But, you know, I'm happy if you guys, that's the only plug I'm going to do about my products. So I'm going to say that I'll thank you. Thank you guys so much for your attention. And if you guys need to go, you can go. Otherwise, I'll stay and answer questions for a little bit and do that. Sound good?